I have told this story 4 times. Each time the room grew quieter, and each time I understood a little better why. I am Senat Vor, once a signals reader aboard the flagship Undying Meridian, and I am old now in a way that has nothing to do with years. My people, the Thren, measure age by the number of voices you have heard fall silent. By that measure, I am the oldest creature in 3 arms of the galaxy, and I did not have to travel far to earn it. I only had to listen. Let me begin where the sodality began, because that is where the arrogance lived, and arrogance is the seed of every silence that followed. We found Earth the way you find a coin in the dust by accident, and with the immediate certainty that it belonged to us. The sodality of concordant worlds had spread across the spiral for 11,000 of your years, and in all that time we had cataloged 900 sapient species and swallowed most of them without needing to chew. We had a word for a world like Earth. We called it HFY, the untended garden. A place with life but no teeth. A place waiting for an owner. The survey drones came back with numbers, and the numbers made the assembly laugh. I remember the laughter. I was in the tears that day, low down where the signal readers sat, and I watched the Council of 9 study the data with their long gray hands folded. Earth had 1 star, 1 habitable world, a scatter of hollow outposts on dead rocks, and a population that fought itself more than it fought anything else. Its weapons were chemical and crude. Its ships could not fold space. Its people lived barely a century and spent most of it, as far as we could tell, quarreling over lines drawn on the surface of their own planet. Vel Ashan, the first of the 9, rose in the amber light and said the words that I have not been able to unhear in all the years since. A garden, he said, does not resist the gardener. The assembly struck the floor with their feet in agreement, a sound like rain on a hull, and the fleet was ordered out. Not the whole fleet. That is the part I want you to understand before I go on. We did not send the whole fleet. We sent a garrison, 40 ships, a rounding error against the strength of the sodality, because 40 ships had been enough to fold in the Kalari, enough to open the belt of Somnu, enough to teach the crystalline Vo that their beautiful cities were only sand arranged in patterns we did not have to respect. 40 ships was not an invasion. 40 ships was a formality. I was aboard the Undying Meridian, which led them. We came into Earth's system with our transponders open, broadcasting the sodality's writ of assumption on every band we could find in their primitive spectrum, because that was the protocol. You gave a garden the chance to be tended peacefully before you tended it by force. The writ was old and elegant, and it said, in essence, you are ours now. Kneel and be kept. Refuse and be corrected. They did not kneel, but they did not fire either, and we took the silence for the paralysis of the doomed. That was our first mistake, and I am ashamed to say we did not notice it as a mistake at all. We noticed it as convenience. For 11 of their days the humans said very little. Their transmissions, when we bothered to translate them, were fragmented, contradictory, 100 governments talking over one another, some pleading, some raging, some, absurdly, arguing about jurisdiction. We watched them with the lazy attention you give an insect that has not yet decided which way to run. Subcommander Ilrith, who ran the Meridian's tactical deck, wrote in the log that the humans were displaying the disorganization typical of a pre-consolidation species, and the council read his assessment and were pleased. What we did not understand, what none of us understood until it was far, far too late, was that the noise was not disorganization. The noise was cover. Underneath it, in bands we were not clever enough to think of as bands, on frequencies buried in what looked to us like error and static, the humans had gone very, very quiet, and very, very fast. Their quarreling governments had, in the space of a single rotation of their world, done a thing our people had not managed once in 11,000 years of conquered. They had agreed. We learned this later. At the time, all we saw was a garden holding still. On the 12th day, first Ashan grew bored, and boredom in a conqueror is the most dangerous weather there is. He ordered a demonstration, not the taking of the world that would come in its season, but a lesson, so the garden would understand its gardener. He chose a city. I will not tell you which. The humans have a name for it that they do not speak in front of outsiders, and I have decided, after everything, that I have not earned the right to say it either. We fired once, from orbit, a single strike from the Meridian's bow lance, the kind of strike that had cracked the domes of the Vaux and been recorded in our archives as unremarkable. The city went dark. 2 million voices ended between one heartbeat and the next. And here is the thing I have carried furthest, the thing that wakes me still. When the strike landed, the human transmissions did not swell. They did not wail. There was no torrent of grief across the bands, no panic, no fresh chaos of 100 governments crying out. Instead, everything that was left of their noise simply stopped. For 4 seconds, the entire planet fell silent. A whole world of clamor, of argument, of that ceaseless human chatter went still all at once, the way a room goes still when someone has finally, quietly decided. I was the one who caught it. I sat at my station with the readings in front of me, and I felt something move down the length of my spine that I had no name for, because my people had a word for fear, and this was not that. This was the thing that comes before you have understood enough to be afraid. I flagged it to Ilrith. I said, "The garden has stopped talking." He glanced at my station and told me it was the expected collapse of a broken society. He told me to log it and stop cluttering the channel. I logged it. 4 seconds of silence from a living world. It is, I think, the most important thing I ever recorded, and no one on the council ever read it. Then the 4 seconds ended, and the humans answered the writ of assumption. They did not answer it with words. The first ship we lost was the Thrashing Dawn on the far picket, and we lost it so completely that for a long moment the tactical deck simply refused to believe the readout. There was no wreckage to speak of. There was no distress call. There was a ship, and then there was a smear of cooling particles where a ship had been, and in between there had been nothing our sensors could resolve, no missile track, no energy bloom, no fold signature. It was as though the universe had reached out one finger and erased the Thrashing Dawn from its own records. We did not even know what had killed it. We still argue about it, those of us who are left. What we agreed on in that first hour was only this: it had come from the planet, from the quiet garden, from the world we had catalogued as toothless. Ilrith went pale down to his throat plates and ordered the fleet to close ranks and raise every shield the sodality had ever built. 40 ships became a fist. We had done this before, at the belt of Somnu, and nothing living had ever broken a sodality fist. The humans broke it in 19 minutes. I could tell you it was a battle. It was not a battle. A battle is a thing where both sides act upon each other. This was closer to a demonstration in return, and I have come to believe in the long silence afterward that they meant it exactly that way, that they had watched us destroy their city as a lesson, and they had decided, coldly and completely, to answer the lesson in kind, so that it would be understood. They did not come up out of the atmosphere in ships. That is what undid us more than anything. We were braced for ships, for a fleet, for something we could name and fight and lose to honorably. Instead, the sky of Earth simply reached. I do not have better words, and I have had years to look for them. Whatever the humans had built beneath their noise, whatever they had agreed to in that first quiet rotation of their world, it did not need to leave the ground to touch us. The undying Meridian was the last to go. I know, because I was aboard it, and because they let it be last on purpose. One by one, the ships of the garrison were unmade around us. Not blown apart in the honest way of war, with fire and tumbling wreckage and pods spilling into the black. Unmade. The gray Sovereign, 4 kilometers of sodality steel, folded inward on itself like a thing being crushed by a hand too large to see, and where it had been there was only a knot of light that winked out and left the stars undisturbed behind it. The faithful chorus. I had friends aboard the chorus. I had trained beside her signals crew. The chorus went so quietly that I did not know she was gone until I called her band and no one answered. That was when the pattern found me, the pattern I have spent my life failing to forget. Each time a ship died, its transmission stopped. Of course they did, but it was not only the ship. Across the whole system, every voice that had been shouting on sodality bands, the panic, the prayers, the frantic tactical chatter of 40 crews realizing they were being erased, each time a ship went dark, a little more of that noise went with it, until the bands that had been a storm of terror were only open, empty, humming with the background of the stars. The galaxy was falling silent, ship by ship, and I was the one man positioned to hear exactly how it sounded. It sounded like nothing. It sounded like the loudest nothing that has ever existed. First Ashan was on the command tier of the Meridian when the end came for us, and I was close enough to hear him. He had commanded the taking of 40 worlds. He had never in his long life issued an order that was not obeyed by the fabric of reality itself. And in the last minutes he stood in the amber light with his long gray hands unfolded. I had never seen them unfolded, and he gave orders to a fleet that no longer existed. Close ranks, he said, to ships that were smears of particles. Return fire, he said, to weapons that had never once managed to fire at the thing killing us. Answer me, he said, to bands where no one answered. And then, at the very end, when the reaching came for the Meridian and the deck began to fold beneath us, and the light of a dying human city that was not really light at all filled the viewports. At the very end, first Ashan of the Nine, first of the sodality of concordant worlds, keeper of the writ of assumption, said the only honest thing I ever heard him say. He said very quietly, "We should have knelt." The Meridian did not fold in on itself the way the others had. I have thought a great deal about why, and I have only one answer that satisfies me, and it is the answer that frightens me most. The humans left the Meridian whole. They left it whole, and they left me alive inside it, drifting and blind and screaming into bands that no one answered, because a lesson requires a witness. They wanted someone to carry it home. So I carried it home. I want to tell you what home was like, when I reached it, because the title of this account promises you a galaxy that fell silent, and you deserve to know that it was not a figure of speech. The sodality had governed the spiral through its chorus, a network of relay minds and transmission throats that carried the voice of the 9 to 900 worlds and carried 900 worlds' obedience back again. In 11,000 years the chorus had never once gone quiet. It was the sound of the conquered. It was, in a real sense, the conquered itself. You could stand on any world we owned and put your ear to the sky and hear the great hum of a galaxy that all spoke with one voice, because we had made sure it had no other voice to speak with. By the time I limped the Meridian back into sodality space on failing engines, the chorus was gone. Not jammed, not damaged, gone the way the thrashing dawn was gone, as though it had been reached into and quietly closed. And I understood then, drifting into a home that no longer hummed, that the humans had not only answered the garrison. In the days it took me to crawl home, they had followed the sound of us backward from relay to relay to relay, the way you follow a thread out of the dark, and everywhere they found the voice of the sodality they had stopped it. They had not killed the worlds. That is the part no one believes when I tell it, and it is the part that matters most. Go to those worlds now and you will find them living, the Kelari breathing free air for the first time in 1,000 years, the crystalline Vo singing in cities we thought we had turned to sand. The humans did not do to the sodality what the sodality had done to them. They did something worse, from the Council's point of view, and better from the point of view of everyone the Council had ever owned. They took away our voice, and they gave everyone else theirs back. The chorus fell silent, and in its place rose 10,000 small sounds that had been forbidden for 100 generations, the Kelari planting songs, the market noise of the belt of Somnu, the low crystalline hum of the Vo remembering how to grieve their dead out loud. To the Council, standing in an amber chamber that no one obeyed anymore, it must have sounded exactly like silence. The great single voice was gone. Nothing answered when the nine spoke. As far as the sodality was concerned, the entire galaxy had fallen still. But it had not fallen still. It had only stopped speaking with our mouth. I have thought about how the humans understood this. How a species we catalogued as toothless, a garden we came to tend, looked at the machinery of an 11,000-year empire and saw, immediately and precisely, that the cruelest thing in it was not the weapons but the chorus, the enforced single voice, and chose to break that surgically and leave the living alive. It is not the act of a savage. We were the savages, with our bow lances and our cities of 2 million voices ended between heartbeats. The humans were something we had no word for, because our language, built by conquerors, had never needed one. I have decided the word is restraint. What frightened the galaxy into silence was not human cruelty. It was the sight of overwhelming power choosing, deliberately, where to stop. Everyone understood it at once. That is what the silence was. 900 worlds, freed in a matter of days, and not one of them cheered aloud. Not one of them rose up in the riot of celebration you would expect from the newly unchained. Because every one of them had done the same arithmetic I had done aboard the Meridian, and the arithmetic was this. A power that could unmake the Sodality's fleet in 19 minutes, that could follow the chorus home and close it like a hand, that could reach across a galaxy, and that chose, at every step, to break only the throat and spare the body, was a power you did not celebrate in front of. It was a power you were quiet in front of, the way you are quiet in front of the ocean, or the dark between stars, or anything else that could end you without effort and has decided, for reasons of its own, not to. The galaxy fell silent because the galaxy was, all at once, being careful. I have met 3 humans in the years since. I want to tell you about the third, because she is the reason I finally understood the 4 seconds. She came to the archive world where I had settled to set down these accounts, an old human by their measure, gray where their kind goes gray, with the small unhurried movements of someone who has stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. She had been, she told me, aboard one of the vessels that answered the garrison. She did not say which. Humans, I have learned, do not boast about that time. They speak of it the way you speak of a house fire you survived, with respect and without pleasure. I asked her the question I had carried for a lifetime. I asked her about the 4 seconds, the silence after we struck the city before the answer came. I told her I had recorded it, that I had felt something down my spine that I still had no word for, and I asked her what it had been. What had happened on that world of endless noise in those 4 seconds when all of it stopped at once. She was quiet for a moment. Humans are quiet more easily than my people ever were. And then she said a thing I have written at the front of every account since, so that no one who comes after us forgets it. She said, that wasn't us going silent. That was us all turning to look at the same thing at the same time. I asked her what they had been looking at. You, she said. We were deciding what you were. She folded her hands in a way that was almost terribly like First Ashan in the amber light. Your people had a word for our world, the untended garden. We intercepted it. We translated it. And for 4 seconds the whole planet stood there holding that word, and every one of us decided the same thing at the same time. She looked at me with eyes that had seen a city die and had answered for it, and there was no cruelty in them at all, which was the most frightening thing of all. We decided we would rather be feared than tended. Then she said the last thing, and I have never been able to add anything to it, so I will end where she ended. You called us a garden, she said. You should have looked closer. A garden that's been fighting itself for 10,000 years isn't weak. It's practiced. I am Senat Vor. I was a signals reader aboard the undying Meridian, and I heard a galaxy fall silent, ship by ship and world by world, until the only voice left was the one that had chosen to spare us. We went to Earth to tend a garden. The garden is still there. It has never once come looking for us. It does not need to. Every night on every world that was ever ours, You can put your ear to the sky and hear the great hum of 900 people speaking freely in their own voices for the first time in 11,000 years. And underneath it, if you are old like me, if you were there, if you know how to listen for the loudest nothing that has ever existed, you can still hear the 4 seconds. The galaxy is not silent anymore, but it has never once forgotten how to be. We taught it that the day we struck the city. And they taught us what it costs.